The house that was never his.
My brother told me I was not invited to his wedding at 7:14 on a Thursday night, while I was sitting alone in my office above a title company in downtown Columbus, listening to the copier chew through a stack of closing packets. The building smelled like burnt coffee, toner dust, and rain-soaked wool from the coats hanging near the receptionist desk. And for a few seconds, I watched his message glow on my phone as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less cruel. "It's only for the closest family, Maddie. Hope you understand." I understood perfectly. The wedding reception was being held inside the 4-bedroom colonial I had bought for him 16 months earlier. The house at 114 Maple Crest Drive had cost $572,000, cash, plus $18,430 in repairs, before the first piece of furniture ever crossed the threshold. I had paid the taxes, paid the insurance, paid the landscaper, and paid the attorney who told me to keep the deed in my name, no matter how loudly my father called it selfish. They thought my silence meant surrender. My name is Madison Reed. I was 32 years old that summer, a senior escrow officer with a reputation for finding bad numbers before they became lawsuits. I could smell forged paperwork the way some people smell smoke, not because I was gifted, but because I had spent 12 years learning that fraud rarely arrives wearing a ski mask. Most of the time, it arrives smiling, holding a pen, telling you it is just family. My family had been telling me that since I was 14. Before my mother died, the Reed house had rules. If Connor got new cleats for baseball, I got the art supplies I needed for school. If my father took him to breakfast after a good report card, my mother made sure I got the same small ceremony for mine. She believed fairness was not a mood or a favor, but a structure inside a home. Then ovarian cancer took her in October, and the structure cracked before the sympathy cards stopped arriving. My father, Martin Reed, loved my brother with the kind of pride men reserve for their own reflection. Connor was tall, charming, quick with a grin, and allergic to consequences. He could wreck a car and somehow become the victim of the telephone pole. He could fail a class and somehow make the teacher sound jealous of his potential. I was different. I was the daughter who managed, the quiet one, the one who could be told no because I would not make dinner uncomfortable. That became my job. At 16, Connor got a used Jeep with a red bow on the hood because my father said boys needed independence. I got a bus pass with 3 weeks left on it and a lecture about gratitude. At 17, he forgot my birthday dinner because Connor had a travel tournament in Dayton, then came home with a foam cooler full of leftovers and asked why the kitchen smelled like disappointment. On graduation day, he arrived late, took one photo with me in my cap, and left early because Connor's summer league coach wanted to talk scholarships. My mother was the last witness who would have objected. Her best friend, Sophia Bennett, did what she could. Sophia owned a small accounting firm in German Village, wore dark cardigans year-round, and kept every receipt from every year of her life in labeled boxes. After my mother's funeral, she stood beside me in the church basement while relatives ate ham off paper plates and said, "Your mother asked me not to let you vanish." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Years later, I learned my mother had signed trust documents, medical directives, and a private letter that Sophia kept in a blue, fireproof safe. She had seen the imbalance before I did. She had known my father would mistake my endurance for lack of need. She had left me enough money to make college easier, maybe even painless, but I was too proud and too angry to touch most of it. I wanted one thing in my life that could not be dismissed as someone else's gift. So, I worked. I worked breakfast shifts at a diner off I-71, where the coffee tasted like rust, and men in orange vests called me sweetheart while leaving quarters under wet mugs. I worked evenings filing documents at a closing office, learning the difference between a warranty deed and a quitclaim deed before I was old enough to drink. I studied at midnight, slept in a room above a laundromat that shook whenever the spin cycle started, and graduated with student debt my father never once asked about. Connor got applause. I got stamina. By 26, I was making more than my father. By 29, I was the person brokers called when a title chain had missing links, when signatures looked wrong, when an investor was trying to hide a lien behind a new LLC formed 2 days ago. My office was not glamorous. Fluorescent lights, gray carpet, metal filing cabinets, and the faint smell of warm plastic from the laminator. But inside that little room, I knew exactly who I was. Outside it, my family still treated me like a utility bill. The call came on March 3rd, 2024, at 4:38 p.m. I remember because the timestamp later mattered. My father had not called me on Christmas. He had not called on my birthday. He had not called when I closed the largest commercial escrow of my career, and my name appeared in a trade newsletter he would never read. But when Connor needed something, Martin Reed suddenly remembered he had a daughter with a bank account. "Your brother needs a proper home," he said. "No hello, no how are you. He's serious about a girl from a good family. Renting makes him look unstable." The girl was Paige Whitlock, daughter of a family that owned half the old brick storefronts in Upper Arlington and behaved like that entitled them to softer chairs in heaven. Her parents were polished, generous in public, and very careful about who entered their circle. My father had spent years trying to stand close enough to people like them that some of their shine might rub off on his jacket. Connor needed a stage. I was asked to build it. A smarter woman would have laughed. A healed woman would have hung up. But there was still a child inside me who believed love might finally arrive if the offering was large enough. Maybe if I gave Connor something undeniable, my father would have to say, "Madison made this possible." Maybe a house could become proof that I belonged. That was my first mistake. The house on Maple Crest was beautiful in the way Midwestern family homes pretend not to be expensive. White trim, black shutters, oak floors, a kitchen with brass fixtures, and a backyard deep enough for string lights and summer photographs. I paid $572,000 in cash from savings and a portion of my mother's trust that Sophia insisted belonged to me. I paid another $9,800 for electrical work, $6,200 for drainage, and $2,430 for the navy front door Connor said Paige would love. But I kept the deed. Sophia sat beside me at the closing table, her reading glasses low on her nose, while Connor scrolled through his phone and my father bragged to the listing agent about how proud he was of his son. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. The notary clicked her stamp with soft, final little sounds. When she slid the deed toward me, Sophia put one finger on the signature line and whispered, "You can be generous without being stupid." I signed my own name. Connor hugged me in the driveway that evening and called me the best sister on earth. My father clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Now you look like a man ready to start a family." Paige cried when she saw the kitchen. Everyone was grateful for exactly 48 hours. Then the erasing began. First, it was small. Thanksgiving would be at Paige's parents' place because they had already ordered the turkey. Christmas morning was private because the house was still messy. My father's birthday dinner was just immediate people, which apparently meant Connor, Paige, my father, and a neighbor who golfed with them on Sundays. I told myself not to be petty. I told myself families forget things when weddings are coming. Then I drove past Maple Crest by accident. It was July 5th, 8:26 p.m., and I was returning from a showing because one of our clients had insisted on measuring a basement twice. The sun had gone orange behind the trees, and the street smelled like cut grass and charcoal smoke. As I passed the house, I saw a banner tied across the porch that read, "Congratulations on your new home." Connor stood below it flipping burgers. Paige's friends took pictures near the hydrangeas I had paid to plant. My father held a beer and laughed like the mortgage had come out of his lungs. No one had invited me. A month later, a colleague sent me a screenshot from Paige's social media. She was standing on the staircase in a cream sweater, one hand on the railing, captioned, "First quiet morning in our forever home." My father had commented, "So proud of the life you two are building." Connor had answered a college friend who asked how he managed to buy in that neighborhood so young. "Dad made it happen," he wrote. I stared until the screen went dark. Not only had Connor taken the gift, he had reassigned the sacrifice to the man who had spent half my life teaching me I ranked second. It was so complete, so casual, that I almost admired the efficiency. They had not stolen the house on paper yet. They had stolen the story. That hurt more than it should have. The wedding invitation never came. I knew the date because Sophia heard it from a client who belonged to the same country club as Paige's mother. August 17th. St. Andrew's Chapel at 4. Reception at the couple's residence at 6. Thick cream invitations. Gold script. My house turned into calligraphy. Still, I waited. The message arrived 11 days before the wedding. It's only for the closest family, Maddie. Hope you understand. Under it, Connor had added a laughing emoji, as if cruelty became lighter with decoration. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on my desk and listened to the copier finish the last page. Something inside me stopped negotiating. I did not scream. I did not call my father. I did not send Connor the list of payments, the invoices, the insurance declarations, the county tax receipts, the deed book reference, or the PDF from the recorder's office showing exactly one owner. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and removed the red binder Sophia had given me for Christmas as a joke. It was no longer a joke. The first tab was labeled Purchase. The second was Taxes. The third was Insurance. The fourth was Repairs. The fifth was Communications. Every document had a date. Every receipt had a source. Every screenshot had been printed, saved to an encrypted drive, and backed up to Sophia's office server at 10:12 p.m. that night, while rain tapped against my apartment windows like fingernails on glass. That was when the audit began. 3 days later, my friend Jenna Ortiz called me from the records department of a law firm near Broad Street. Jenna and I had survived enough bad closings together to speak in short, careful sentences when something smelled wrong. I answered on speaker while eating cold noodles at my desk. "Madison," she said, "has Connor asked you to sign anything recently?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Jenna told me a man matching Connor's name had contacted a real estate attorney asking whether a long-term occupant could claim ownership if the original buyer had intended it as a gift. He had also asked about preparing a quitclaim deed for a family transfer and whether an electronic signature would be accepted if the grantor was difficult to schedule. The attorney declined the matter because the questions were too evasive. My office went very quiet. I asked Jenna to send nothing, say nothing, and forget the call happened if anyone asked. Then I drove to Sophia's house with the binder on the passenger seat. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon tea and printer ink. She read the notes without interrupting, then unlocked the blue fireproof safe where she kept my mother's documents and the duplicate house file. "This is no longer ingratitude," she said. "This is a plan." The next morning, I met Russell Kane, the kind of attorney who wore plain navy suits and made dangerous people nervous by never raising his voice. His office overlooked the courthouse. The lobby smelled like floor wax, old leather, and coffee that had been sitting too long on a warmer. I placed the red binder on his conference table and pushed it toward him. Russell read for 17 minutes without speaking. Then he said, "Your brother has no legal claim to the house, but if he tries to forge your signature or obtain financing using ownership he does not have, we may have fraud, attempted theft by deception, and possibly wire fraud depending on the communications. Do not warn him. Do not argue. Let paper do what paper does." That sentence changed my life. We pulled the county records. We ordered a title update at 9:03 a.m. on August 9th. We placed a fraud alert with the recorder's office. Russell sent a confidential notice to the title network flagging any deed, transfer, refinance, or HELOC attempt involving 114 Maple Crest Drive without my wet signature verified in person. Sophia drafted a ledger of every dollar I had spent, down to the $43.16 receipt for brass cabinet pulls, Paige said, made the kitchen feel warmer. By Monday, the trap had edges. Connor walked into it on Wednesday. At 2:41 p.m., someone using a Gmail address with Connor's initials uploaded a quitclaim deed through a remote notary platform. The grantor's signature was mine, except my middle initial was wrong. The slant on the M was forced, and the IP address traced to a co-working office 2 blocks from Connor's employer. The receiving party was Connor Reed. The stated consideration was $10. Attached to the packet was a note claiming I had always intended the property as a wedding gift. I laughed once when Russell showed it to me. Not because it was funny, because after all those years of being told I was dramatic, difficult, emotional, jealous, and selfish, the crime itself had arrived in a folder labeled Family Transfer. It was almost elegant in its stupidity. Russell contacted the platform. The account was suspended. The submission was preserved. The bank that had received Connor's preliminary home equity inquiry preserved its emails too. Connor had asked about borrowing $86,000 against the house for wedding consolidation and liquidity. He had not owned one nail in the baseboards. Now we had more than a boundary. We had evidence. Russell wanted to file quietly after the wedding. Sophia wanted to confront my father immediately, preferably with a witness and a locked door between them. I wanted neither. I wanted precision. If Connor and my father had built a public life on a private lie, then the truth needed to arrive where the lie was strongest. The reception. I did not try to ruin the ceremony. That mattered to me, maybe more than it should have. Paige did not know enough yet to deserve humiliation at the altar, and even Connor's lies did not give me permission to turn vows into theater. But the reception was different. The reception was the stage built from my money, my silence, and my exclusion. So, I sold the house. The buyer was a surgeon relocating from Cincinnati, already renting nearby, pre-approved, cash-heavy, and desperate for Maplecrest because his children attended school 2 blocks away. We had been in quiet conversations since Russell advised me to evaluate all options. On August 14th at 11:30 a.m., 3 days before the wedding, I accepted his offer for $604,000 with a 30-day occupancy notice to the current residents. The closing was clean. The deed was recorded on August 16th at 3:17 p.m. 1 day before Connor's wedding, the house was no longer mine. That sentence might sound like a loss. It was not. It meant Connor could not forge it away from me. It meant the money returned to the person who had earned it. It meant any future conversation about Maplecrest would happen with a buyer, a recorded deed, and a legal notice Connor could not charm, guilt, or shout into obedience. The wedding day was painfully beautiful. August 17th arrived bright and hot, with cicadas screaming from the maple trees and sunlight flashing off car windows like small warnings. I did not go to the chapel. I parked 6 blocks away under a sycamore and listened to jazz because silence felt too sharp. My dress was simple. My shoes were flat. The red binder sat on the passenger seat like a second heartbeat. Jenna texted from inside. "Paige looks stunning. Your father is acting like he is hosting a royal event. Connor is grinning too much." I watched the clock. At 5:48 p.m., the first guests began arriving at Maplecrest. Caterers rolled silver carts through the side gate. The florist carried white roses past the navy front door. A violinist tuned under the porch, and the thin notes floated down the street above the smell of hydrangeas, hot pavement, and expensive perfume. A wooden sign near the walkway said, "Welcome to our home." Our home. At 6:09 p.m., Russell's courier parked at the curb. He was a soft-spoken man named Daniel, wearing a gray suit and carrying a cream envelope large enough to look official without looking theatrical. Inside were the recorded deed history, the sale confirmation, the notice to vacate, copies of the attempted forged quitclaim submission, the preserved IP log, and Russell's letter advising Connor to retain counsel. Paper has a sound when it arrives with authority. At 6:14 p.m., the wedding party shuttle pulled up. Paige stepped down first, veil pinned over one shoulder, bouquet in both hands. Connor followed, adjusting his cufflinks, wearing the easy smile of a man who believed the world had finally agreed to his version of events. My father stood by the front steps in a charcoal suit, cheeks flushed with pride and bourbon. Daniel approached the porch. "I have a legal packet for the occupants and parties connected to 114 Maplecrest Drive," he said. Connor tried to wave him away. "Not today, man." Paige took the envelope. That small motion did more damage than any speech I could have made. Brides are allowed to open envelopes on their wedding day. People assume paper belongs to them when they are wearing white. She broke the seal with one fingernail while guests gathered behind her in a sparkling, confused crescent. The violin stopped first. Paige read the first page, then the second. Her face did not crumple. It sharpened. She looked up at Connor with the expression of a woman discovering the floor beneath her was painted canvas. "Who is Madison Reed?" she asked. Nobody moved. My father stepped forward. "Paige, sweetheart, this is just some legal confusion." She ignored him. "Connor, why does this deed history say Madison Reed owned this house? And why does the current notice say we have 30 days to leave?" At 6:18 p.m., from 3 blocks away, I sent the email Russell had prepared. Subject line: Maplecrest Property Records. Recipients: Connor, Paige, my father, Sophia, and Russell. Body: the property at 114 Maplecrest Drive was purchased by me on April 22, 2024, remained solely in my name, and was sold on August 16, 2024. Attached are the recorded deed, payment ledger, title update, and notice to vacate. Further communication should go through counsel. Madison. No adjectives, no begging, no rage. Jenna called me at 6:21, whispering so softly I could hear her breathing more than her words. "Your dad just checked his phone. Connor looks sick. Paige's mother is reading the packet now. Maddie, everyone can hear them." I stayed in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. Inside the front hall, Margaret Whitlock, Paige's mother, took control with the cold grace of a woman who had chaired too many charity boards to be intimidated by panic. "Reception can wait," she said. "Explanation cannot." The confrontation moved into the foyer, but the double doors stayed open, and sound travels beautifully through expensive homes. Guests heard pieces. My name. Deed. Forgery. 30 days. Closest family. At one point, Connor tried to say I had always been unstable about family matters, and Paige repeated the phrase from his message, as if reading the label on poison. "You told your sister she was not closest family," she said, "after she bought this house?" My father tried to save him. "Madison likes control. She uses money to make people feel indebted." Paige's voice stayed quiet. That made it worse. "No, Martin. She used paperwork. You used her." Then Margaret found the forged quitclaim exhibit. There are silences that feel empty, and there are silences that feel crowded with consequences. Jenna told me later the foyer went so still that the photographers lowered their cameras. The air smelled like roses, champagne, and the faint metallic heat of panic. Connor said, "That was just a draft." My father said, "Families handle things informally." Russell's letter, sitting open on the hall table, disagreed with both of them in 12-point Garamond. Paige asked one question. "Did you try to put her signature on this?" Connor looked at my father before he looked at his wife. That was the answer. Paige removed the wedding band he had placed on her finger less than 2 hours earlier and set it on the foyer table beside the notice to vacate. The tiny sound of metal touching wood moved through the room like a gavel. "I will not marry into fraud," she said. She did not run. She did not sob for the cameras. She turned to the guests gathered near the entrance and said, "I am sorry you were brought here under false pretenses. Please eat if you would like, but there will be no toast to a marriage built on a hidden deed, a forged document, and the exclusion of the woman who paid for this house." Disclosure is not shouting. It is execution with witnesses. My father's golf friend Walter was there because Columbus Society is a bowl too small for people who think they are important. Jenna said he stared at my father and muttered, "Rich, your daughter bought the place?" Someone else said, "And they didn't invite her?" Another guest asked whether the police were coming. The caterers froze beside trays of crab cakes. The planner removed the "Welcome to our home" sign without being asked. The image died before the party did. By 7:02 p.m., Paige's father had canceled the honeymoon suite in Santorini. By 7:19, Margaret had called their family attorney. By 7:43, Russell received a voicemail from a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit asking to preserve all documents related to the forged transfer and home equity inquiry. By 8:10, Connor had called me 9 times. My father had called 13. I answered none of them. The next morning, my father left a voicemail that began with, "How could you do this to your brother?" and ended with, "Your mother would be ashamed." I listened to it once while standing in my kitchen, barefoot, with sunlight on the tile and coffee burning in the pot because I had forgotten to turn off the warmer. Then I called him back. He answered on the first ring. "Madison, you need to fix this." "I sold my house," I said. "You destroyed his wedding." "Connor destroyed his wedding when he built it on a lie. You helped him furnish it." This family has given you everything. I looked at the red binder on my table, at the tabs, the receipts, the printed message telling me I was not closest family. "No," I said, "this family taught me to document everything." For once, he had no quick sentence. The legal part unfolded without drama, which is how the worst consequences usually arrive. The attempted deed transfer was referred for investigation. The home equity emails became part of the file because they crossed platforms, banks, and electronic communications. Connor's company did not fire him immediately. That would have been too simple. Instead, he was removed from a client-facing promotion track, then placed on leave after compliance learned he had used the co-working space connected to his employer's client portal login within 14 minutes of the forged submission. Reputations do not always explode. Sometimes they stop being invited upward. Paige filed for annulment consultations, then paused only long enough to separate her accounts and remove her name from every vendor contract connected to Connor. Her parents repaid the guests who had traveled. The country club gossip did the rest. My father lost 2 board nominations, 1 golf partner, and the warm social fog he had spent years trying to enter. People could forgive family dysfunction. They had trouble forgiving financial embarrassment with exhibits. Connor hired an attorney and threatened to sue me. Russell sent 1 letter. It contained the deed, the payment ledger, the recorded sale, the forged quitclaim packet, the IP preservation notice, and Connor's own messages referring to the wedding as closest family only. At the bottom, Russell wrote, "My client welcomes any formal claim you believe can survive documentary review." No claim arrived. 30 days after the wedding, Connor moved out of Maplecrest Drive with 2 rented trucks and no photographers. Paige did not help. My father stood on the curb with his arms crossed, staring at the navy front door like it had betrayed him personally. The new owner painted it deep red the following week. Jenna sent me a picture. I stared at it for a long time. I expected revenge to feel hot. It did not. It felt like a window opening in a room I had not realized was full of smoke. I was not happy that my brother's life had cracked. I was not proud that Paige had been hurt, but I was relieved in a way that made my hands tremble. For the first time since my mother died, I was not carrying a family system on my back and calling the weight love. That was freedom. Connor called me once more, 3 months later, from a number I did not recognize. His voice sounded smaller. He had entered a pretrial diversion program for the forged deed attempt, paid restitution for investigative costs, and lost the job he thought made him look impressive. My father had stopped answering some of his calls because men like Martin Reed do not know what to do with sons who become liabilities. "I'm sorry," Connor said. I stood in the doorway of my own house, a small brick ranch in Worthington with a front porch, old maples, and morning light in the kitchen. The deed had one name on it. Mine. "Sorry for what exactly?" I asked. He breathed in. I could hear traffic behind him, the dull rush of a road moving without him. For 10 seconds, I thought he would dodge. Then his voice broke in a way that did not ask me to rescue it. "For taking what you gave me and pretending Dad gave it. For letting you be erased. For trying to make the lie legal." It was the first honest inventory my brother had ever made. I did not forgive him that day. Forgiveness is not a vending machine where apology goes in and absolution falls out. But I told him I hoped he became the kind of man who never needed another woman to pay for his image. He cried quietly. I let him. Then I ended the call. Sophia came over that evening with soup, bread, and the blue folder my mother had left for me. Inside was the letter I had never been ready to read. My mother wrote that love without fairness becomes hunger. She wrote that my father admired strength only when it served him. She wrote that if I ever found myself buying a place at someone else's table, I should stand up before the bill arrived. I read that sentence 3 times. With part of the money from the sale, I paid off the student loans I should never have needed. With another part, Sophia and I created the Elena Reed Fund, a small scholarship for girls who lose their mothers before adulthood and learn too early how quiet a house can become. The first check was for $10,000. The memo line said, "For daughters who should not have to disappear." The red binder sits on a shelf in my office now. I do not open it often. I do not need to. The lesson is no longer inside the paper, it is inside me. A boundary is not cruelty. A record is not revenge. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can say to the family that trained her to beg is nothing at all. Just her signature.